Welcome to our newest conversation on the Roll-Toddy draft block. I'm Baker Lehman here with Herbie May, as always. Herbie, how you doing today?
What's up, brother? Good to see you. Tough loss a couple weeks ago, huh?
That it was. It's been had a little time to heal, though, and we are about halfway through the college football season, and we're going to break down who is in our college football playoff and some prospects we've been keeping our eye on for various reasons. So let's dive right in. Herbie, who is your top four? And we're going to do the top four a little differently, not based on who's in just if the season ends today, but we've looked ahead at some of these teams' schedules, who they play, who they have yet to play, and who at the end of the season after championship weekend is going to be in the college football playoff in your eyes.
We were talking about this before we even started the video. It's just tough to even pick this right now. I've got Florida State in there. I don't think anyone's going to beat Florida State. I've got Ole Miss in there. I think that comes down to the Egg Bowl in the season. And I've got Notre Dame, and I've got Mississippi State. Obviously, two of those teams, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, comes down to that last game. Notre Dame, I just love what I saw in that game against Florida State, and I thought they were the rightful winner. I don't think Florida State deserved to win off that call. Like you said, I mean, that tough call to make, tough call not to make, actually, like you said earlier. I've got those four teams in there. Florida State, I just don't see losing. They're just that good of a team. The ACC is that much of a joke this year. And Ole Miss, tough ride out. Same with Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State's biggest challenge is definitely everyone's waiting to see that Alabama game. But those four teams who have gotten in the playoff.
Yeah, well, it's hard to disagree with a lot of those picks the way all those teams have been playing. I have Mississippi State in. I think even if they lose to Alabama, that they can end up beating Ole Miss, even though it's in the Grove, the Egg Bowl's in Oxford, which is going to be really tough. But the thing about Mississippi State that I like compared to Ole Miss is their offensive balance. Ole Miss definitely has a more talented team, and there's no doubt about that. But Dan Mullen has been in more of these big game championship scenarios from his days back at Florida. He has I would say that more balance on offense. Dak Prescott can obviously do it all. He can run, he can throw, and he's really evolved as a quarterback this season. But they can control the clock and control the pace of the game with their running backs and Dak's leg. Plus, they have a group of very talented, not really even very, but shockingly talented receivers that a lot of people have never heard of and can really air it out. And then defensively, once again, Ole Miss is more talented defensively than Mississippi State. But Mississippi State, I think, has just played some lights-out defense. And like I said, I just think that offense can control the clock in a way that Ole Miss can't. And I think that might end up biting Ole Miss at the end of the year. So I have this one's a weird pick for me, is Oregon. It is no secret to anyone that I am not a big Oregon fan. They're generally pretty soft when it really comes down to it. But they're getting healthier. You're noticing that Stanford is not as good a team as a lot of people thought they were. And just when it really comes down to it, a lot of teams in the Pac-12, outside of maybe Arizona State, aren't nearly as good as we thought they were. UCLA isn't that good. Stanford, as I just mentioned, isn't that good. Arizona State's playing a lot better, but still not great defensively overall. They held, a Stanford team that we expect to be very good down to, just under about 10 points. But I think overall, when it really comes down to it, it's going to be Oregon sneaking in. I think Florida State gets in because I think that they can win out. But if Florida State loses any one of these games, they're not in. They will fall short even being the defending national title winners. And they just don't play any very good teams down the line. There are a lot of trap games, but no one who I'm really like, oh, Florida State can't win that game, even with how disappointing they've been. But they really have to fight complacency and fight themselves more than they have to play good teams. And then last but not least, I got my Crimson Tide getting in. I simply think that at the end of the day, I know. I think Alabama can win out. They go to Tennessee this weekend and should feast on that inexperienced Tennessee offensive line. They have a bye week. Then they go to Baton Rouge. And this is really almost, I think, potentially the hardest game of the year, is that game in Baton Rouge where Bama has not played very well on the road. Oxford obviously was a beast in itself that weekend. Arkansas was a raucous crowd, but Death Valley is a whole different animal. And you've seen some of the communication errors that Blake Sims has had away from home. And, that raucous crowd, I've been in that Tiger Stadium on Saturday night. I know how loud it gets there and just how ferocious that team can be on Saturday. But Alabama has a very good record there at night. Nick Saban knows how to coach there. Lane Kiffin's going to, I think, stick to more of a basic game plan rather than trying to do too much like he did against Ole Miss. So I think Bama can win that game. And then, as you've seen this past weekend, when Bama comes home, they're a completely different animal. Bryant-Denny was going nuts this past Saturday, and they blew out Texas A&M 59-0. As you just said, Herbie, before we started the video, they hurt Texas A&M. They absolutely punished them for even thinking they could get a first down in Tuscaloosa. So I think that Mississippi State, for as much of their praise as I just sang, I don't think that they can beat Bama at home. Western Carolina obviously isn't a threat to beat Alabama, just like Presbyterian isn't a threat to beat Ole Miss. And then Saban's record in revenge games, especially at home, is sensational. So when Auburn comes into town for the Iron Bowl, it's going to be just as big an Iron Bowl as last year, but it's going to be in Tuscaloosa. And I just, once again, I don't think Auburn's as good as people think they are. And they're just like what you saw when they played Mississippi State. They remind me of a little bit better version of last year's Texas A&M team. High pace, super talented, fast offense, but that defense is not nearly as good as we thought it was. And they've lost a lot on defense, not only to the draft, but to injury. And so when I think it comes down to it, Bama can sneak into the SEC title game, beat even if they play Georgia. I think they can beat a Georgia and sneak into the college football playoff. I think that Alabama can do it. The coaching staff has been there for the big title runs. A lot of the players have been there. Blake Sims has been there even though this is his first year playing. I think Bama can sneak in.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the rant of a Bama fan. Playoff. No, you make a lot of good points, but a lot of my buddies are leaving for Death Valley tonight and tomorrow morning, and I'm not going. But God, we were there. You were there, and it is a whole different animal. Those fans are crazy. It's a different beast. I hope we can crawl out of there. That's a tough game for us. Who do you have winning the Egg Bowl? So clearly, since you don't have Ole Miss and you've got us losing somewhere, who do you have us losing to?
I think Auburn can beat Ole Miss, and I think that Mississippi State can beat Ole Miss. Like I said, the thing about Auburn, the only difference really with them, as I mentioned, I made that Texas A&M comparison. I think with Auburn, the difference is since they're a rushing attack rather than an air raid passing attack, they can still control the clock. They play too fast to really control the clock, and that's the flaw in the Gus Malzahn system. But I think that they can play well enough to beat Ole Miss. And then they're going to, I think, like I said, even though Ole Miss is going out for revenge in both those games against Mississippi State and against Ole Miss, I just think the two teams' ability to keep it on the ground and really run the ball effectively just trumps Ole Miss's ability to score and play great defense, but they can't run the ball. And I think at the end of the day, as much as college football towards a passing attack, I think that's going to be a flaw in Ole Miss's game plan somewhere down the road.
That lack of a running game just hurts us beyond all belief. But when you look, it's funny when you look at Dak and you look at Bo, they're really not too far off numbers-wise. It's crazy. You would never even realize it. I didn't realize it at all, but I was putting them side by side here, and they're not off. I mean, Dak's obviously better, but they're not off by far. But that lack of a running game just doesn't give us the ability to control the clock. So you're right there. We lack there, but God, it's so frustrating. Why couldn't we get Bo Scarborough? God, gosh. But anyway, no, I think you're right. I think we're not far off in our picks. God, I just can't wait.
I like what you mentioned about Notre Dame sneaking in. Even with that loss to FSU, Notre Dame looked much better than people expected them to. You made that point before it really started. But I think also they have to make two big West Coast trips out to Arizona State and out to USC, and I think that could really wear on them. USC, because USC has had this run of dominance over Notre Dame, and in the last 3 years it's ended. I think this USC team, which is playing pretty well right now, despite their lack of depth, can really get up for that game at the end of the season. Just like I think Arizona State is playing much better football than people expected, I think that they can get up for the Notre Dame game too. After Notre Dame's going to kind of be sleepwalking through a Navy game the week before.
So I can't wait, dude. I'm so excited.
I mean, we've talked about this. We've seen it 1,000 times that November is a huge month for college football. No matter who's set up to play who, no matter what the rankings are, a lot of crazy things can happen in November, and that's what makes this playoff so exciting.
Gosh, I'm excited. Hotty toddy.
Well, Roll-Toddy. I can't disagree with a lot of our picks here, but that's going to be it for our first segment. We're going to come back for another segment to talk about some of the prospects who've impressed us, disappointed us, and then really a guy who's really shocked us here. But thanks for watching the Roll-Toddy Draft Blog. We'll see you in a little bit.